I want to give a special shout out to all my patrons first. Thank you so much to my Bibliospren, Bibliohowlers, and my Bibliomancers. It means a lot to me that you give me your extra support for my passion and hobby. Hi everyone, Petrik here. In today's video, I'll be talking about all the books that I finished last month, in the month of February. It was an incredibly busy month for me, but I'm really pleased that I was able to read and finish 5 novels, 1 novella, and also 15 volumes of manga. 3 of the books that I finished last month, I have posted a full spoiler-free review of them on my YouTube channel, so you feel free to check them out. But remember that I always post a full spoiler-free review of all the books that I finish, not counting manga, but of all the books that I finish on my Goodreads or on my blog, Novel Notions. So yeah, let's talk about them. The first one that I finished last month, it was Coraline by Neil Gaiman. I posted a full spoiler-free review of Coraline by Neil Gaiman. It was the first time I read Coraline, despite how much I really enjoyed watching the movie adaptation. That's a long time ago, I think almost 10 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I really enjoyed the animated movie because I got this gift, the Lyra book edition of Coraline from my friend. I finally took a chance and, well, read Coraline by Neil Gaiman, and it is as good as the movie adaptation, and in some parts it is even better. I have no idea whether it is influenced by the interior illustrations inside this edition or not, because this book, this edition, it contains more than 20 interior illustrations by Rovina Kai, and they are all incredibly stunning. But honestly speaking, I felt a bit sad that my review of Coraline by Neil Gaiman end up being the lowest performance when it comes to video on my YouTube channel. So yeah, that's a bit of a downer. I think some of you might know about this already, but some book reviews just don't do well in the booktube community. I have no idea why, and I'm not even sure which book reviews will be more interesting to viewers. But anyway, that's beside the point. That Coraline is a great novella. I didn't even know this was a novella, but apparently it is only about 30,000 words long. So you can definitely read this one in a single day. It took me probably about 1 to 2 hours to finish, probably 2 hours if I remember correctly. But the biggest pleasant surprise for me, it was I have read 2 books by Neil Gaiman. It was Norse mythology. That one was a good one, but I have always been a fan of Norse mythology. And then Neverwhere, which again is good. But those are the only 2 books by Neil Gaiman that I have read, and I never felt like I am compelled to read more books by Neil Gaiman. But after reading Coraline, this has become one of my favorite novellas, and I will definitely read more books by him. But I think the next book that I will read from Neil Gaiman, it will be The Graveyard Book. Somehow out of all of his books, that one has caught my interest. And then maybe if I end up enjoying that, maybe I would try reading American Gods. Yes, I haven't read American Gods yet. I know that that one is one of Neil Gaiman's most popular book. But yeah, this was super enjoyable. I like Coraline as a character. I think Neil Gaiman's prose here is so efficient and effective. Really loved it, and I know I will do a second read of this someday. If you have watched the animated movie adaptation and you haven't read the book, I strongly recommend you to try reading the book as well. So Coraline was the one and only novella that I finished reading last month, and the first novel that I finished, it was The Dollmakers by Lynn Buchanan. Again, just like Coraline, I have posted a full spoiler-free review of this one, but this book, it is an upcoming debut. The Dollmakers is not out yet. It is slated to be released 5 months from now, in the month of August, but I had the chance to read and review it early. And in my opinion, The Dollmakers is one of the nominees for the best fantasy debut of 2024. There are still plenty of fantasy debut this year that I still want to read. So the position for the best fantasy debut of 2024 will have to wait until later, after I read the other fantasy debuts that I want to read this year. But this one, it features one of the most infuriating main character that I have ever come across. It reminded me of Rin. Rin from the Poppy War Trilogy by R.F. Kuang. The main character, even though technically she is smart, but she is so infuriating, selfish, unhinged, and just needed to be humbled and slapped multiple times so that she come to realization just how awful she has behaved. And this is done intentionally. So if you are going to try reading The Dollmakers, this is something that you have to remember. Xian, the main character, one of the 2 main characters, is that type of character. She can be insanely infuriating for about the first half of the book. But thankfully, there is another main character, Ikisa, and I really love Ikisa. I think she's just so easy to relate, and well, there were some scenes in the Dollmakers that definitely made me sad because of Ikisa, and some also made me happy. But one of the things that I appreciate the most about these two main characters and also the other brief POV characters is how engaging they were to read. Lynn Buchanan's talent as a storyteller, one of her main talent is really to craft compelling characters and also distinct voices. I never felt bored reading the Dollmakers. There were so many things that I enjoyed about this debut, and I think many people will enjoy reading this one as well. I was quite surprised though, because this book doesn't actually has any chapters. Yeah, this book doesn't have any chapters, and I think the only time I have encountered something like this is from Terry Pratchett's books, which I have never finished reading. So yeah, that is still one of my goals, to finish Terry Pratchett's Discworld books someday. But anyway, back to the point, even though this one doesn't have any chapters at all, somehow the exclusion of chapters end up enhancing the narrative. On Amazon and also on Goodreads, this book, The Dollmakers, has been pitched as a standalone novel, but I do not think that is the case. There will be more books in this series for sure. I have no doubt about that. But yeah, if you want to know my full thoughts regarding The Dollmakers, you can check out my full review on my YouTube channel or on my Goodreads. But for now, I will just say that this is one of my favorite debuts of this year, for sure. The other one being The Silver Blood Promise by James Logan that I read last year. And moving on after that, when I was reading The Dollmakers, I was actually reading another book. And this is Defiant by Brennan Sanderson, the fourth and the final book in the Skyward series by Brennan Sanderson and also Jency Patterson. Jency Patterson is involved in the writing of the Skyward Flight, a collection of novellas. I am so confused by these terms because they are technically not novellas, but at the same time, they are not long novels as well. So probably short novels, the collection of stories in the Skyward Flight omnibus. But yeah, I finally finished reading Defiant by Brennan Sanderson. And as an installment, I think this is my favorite in the entire series. There is one thing that I noticed from reading Brennan Sanderson's non-Cosmere books. Although I always have a great time reading them, but none of them ever managed to become one of my favorite books. Like, for example, The Frugal Wizard, or the second Secret Project novel, and then Legion, The Many Lives of Stephen Leeds, and then A Snapshot, and finally, the Skyward series. I have read all of this, and none of the books in this series managed to become one of my favorite books. I still have a Reckoner's Trilogy and also the Rhythmatist by him to read, and then I will be caught up with all of his books, I think. But this book, Defiant, the fourth and the final book, the first half of it really dealt with Spencer being reacquainted with the main supporting characters of the entire series, or to be more precise, the crew of the Skyward Flight that she bonded with in the first book, Skyward. I know that many people have complained about this, meaning that Spencer has been separated from the crew of the Skyward Flight for pretty much almost the entire series. And I understand that. That is indeed the case. Only in Skyward and Defiant that we really get to see Spencer spending her time physically with the crew of the Skyward Flight. And the first half is really dealing with that and all the changes that the characters have went through. And I think this is the right step, especially after Cytonic, that really felt like fillers to me. Even though some things mentioned there definitely do count as something super important for the series, but overall as a book, Cytonic do felt like fillers to me. And the first half of Defiant is focused on Spencer and the crew of the Skyward Flight's character development and also preparing for the grand stage, for the grand conclusion in the second half of the book. I should note though that I don't usually have a great time reading YA books now, YA fantasy or YA sci-fi books now, but with this one, I really had a great time with it. And I know even though in the UK, the Skyward series is categorized for adult readers, and in the US, it is categorized for YA readers. I think this is the kind of series that can be read by both young adult or adult readers, simple as that, and it still features the prominent Sanderlands portion in the second half of the book, and it was really good. So yeah, overall, I had a great time reading Defiant and the entire Skyward series. At the moment, I do not think I will be reading the sequel series, Skyward Legacy. One of my main issue with the Skyward series, even though it is still very short compared to many Sanderson's Cosmere books or Cosmere series, but it still felt too long, unnecessarily, because I do not think the Skyward series needed to be this long in its length, especially because of the Skyward Flight Omnibus. That one was simply too long for its own good. The length of the series made the series longer than it should be. That's really my honest thought regarding the Skyward series. But as a conclusion, this was great, but at the same time, I do not think it needed another sequel series to it. So for now, I think this is where I will part ways with the Skyward series, unfortunately. And speaking of Sanderson, the next book that I will be talking about, the next book that I finished last month, this entire trilogy has been marked as Sanderson Light. It has been appraised by plenty of readers as pretty much a light version of Sanderson. And from the first book, I have to agree. I'm talking about The Voice of War by Zack Argyle, the first book in the Treadlight trilogy. So remember that I have posted plenty of sub-published fantasy series video and also underrated series video, and the name Treadlight has been mentioned many times. Treadlight trilogy by Zack Argyle. I have waited 2 years. Honestly, I have waited 2 years before I start reading this trilogy. Why? Because I waited for the deluxe hardcover edition. Yeah, I have known about it. I have known about the deluxe hardcover edition for 2 years now, if I remember correctly, or maybe it is even longer than that. But yeah, ever since I knew about it, I have decided to wait for the ultimate edition of the trilogy before I start reading it, and the wait was worth it. This edition is beautiful, it is gorgeous. The entire deluxe hardcover, it comes with some fully colored interior artworks and an acid-free paper, and then Smithson binding and all that. And plus, the price is relatively affordable for a trilogy that reaches almost 900 pages long, and the quality is really good. Not only for the book production, but also for the story. I have heard from a lot of people that the first book, Voice of War, is really the weakest of the trilogy. And if that is the case, then I will have a super great time reading Stones of Light and also The Bonds of Chaos, because I already had a great time reading Voice of War. You can definitely tell that Brandon Sanderson's books is one of Zack Argyle's main inspiration. One of the main characters, Chris, his background really reminded me a lot of Dalinar from the Stormlight Archive. Quite a lot, really. But overall, I do not think this book is too similar to Brandon Sanderson's books. I do not think that is the case. It is still Zack Argyle's own work. But the magic system, that one is definitely a combination of Mistborn and also The Lightbringer by Brennan. If you have read this book and maybe even the trilogy, you will know what I'm talking about. But the three main characters, all of them were distinct enough, and the book is quite short. I think it is about 100,000 words long, and I end up reading this one in about 3 days. Despite how busy I was, I had such a great time reading it. It is not a perfect book. It is not one of my favorite books, but I have a good feeling the second or the third book will end up joining the list of my favorite books. I look forward to reading Stones of Light really soon this month. But if you love Mistborn trilogy, you love reading Brandon Sanderson's books, and you love the theme of parenthood, the theme of love, family, you have to try reading the Treadlight trilogy, or at least Voice of War, to see how you feel about it first. But I know, based on the cliffhanger ending of The Voice of War, I think Stones of Light has such a good potential to be even better, and I look forward to reading it very soon. And after I finished reading The Voice of War, I finally took a plunge into The Ashes of Man by Christopher Ruocchio, the fifth book in the Sun Eater series, and also originally the second part or the second half of Kingdoms of Death, which is now the fourth book in the Sun Eater series. But The Ashes of Man, the fifth book in the series, so it means, now that I'm done with this one, it means I only have 2 more main novels to read in the Sun Eater, and then I will be done with this absolutely amazing and phenomenal sci-fi series. This Quiet Gods is already in my hand, and I cannot wait to read that next month. But for this book, I have posted a full spoiler-free review of The Ashes of Man on my YouTube channel. So if you want to know my full spoiler-free thoughts, check that one out. I have done my best to make my review as spoiler-free as possible, so that new readers or maybe new time readers to the Sun Eater series, if let's say they stumbled upon that, they won't get spoiled. But in this wrap-up video, I will just say that this one, I did not love it as much as the previous books in the series, but it is only a matter of choosing favorites. Every book in the Sun Eater series, all of them are part of my favorite books of all time, and that includes The Ashes of Man as well. And the cover art here, you can see Valka Ondera, so you can definitely expect that this book is not only about Hadrian Marlowe, but it is about Valka Ondera as well. She is a big part of The Ashes of Man and also hugely influential in enhancing my experience of reading this one, especially the Battle of Perfugium. If you have read this one, if you have read the Ruocchio of The Ashes of Man, you will know what I'm talking about. Let's make it as simple as that. The first half, The Ashes of Man, felt more contemplative and slower, especially compared to Kingdoms of Death. Understandably, Kingdoms of Death was simply full throttle darkness and brutality. But this one, it dealt with the repercussion of what has happened in Kingdoms of Death, slowly and also effectively, and then it all exploded in the Battle of Perfugium. Love this one, as I said. Currently, The Sun Eater and also Red Rising Saga by Pierce Brown tied as my favorite sci-fi series of all time, both of them. But I think Disquiet Gods will be the tiebreaker, especially if it is as good as Demon in White or even better than that. If that ends up coming true for me, then the tie position will be over. I look forward to finding out how that will turn out. But yeah, love The Ashes of Man, of course, as expected. And finally, the last book that I finished last month, it was A Natural History of Dragons by Mary Brennan, the first book in the Memoirs of Lady Trent series. I knew that going into this one, I knew that this will be different from the usual kind of fantasy and sci-fi books that I love to read, and it is indeed very different. But it was also surprisingly quite enjoyable, especially in the first half of A Natural History of Dragons. So here's the thing, I think I have mentioned this plenty of times, I am a fan of reading something that is told in a memoir or a chronicle that is told in the main character's own voice, such as The Kingkill Chronicle by Petrik Rothfuss, The Sun Eater by Christopher Ruocchio, or maybe Bloodsong by Anthony Ryan. And A Memoir of Lady Trent follow that. We are reading the memoir of Lady Trent, and this is the beginning of her adventures before she became famous like the one in her present time frame. And we noticed that many times in the entire narrative. She likes to reflect on the situation that she faced in her past and compared it to her current situation, on how technology have advanced since then, for example, and how she became famous. And for the first half of A Natural History of Dragons, as I said, I was so surprised by how much I enjoyed it. I think it was a great coming-of-age story. I like Lady Trent. She is fierce, she was determined, and also Mary Brennan's writing is so easy to read. In my opinion, it is so compelling and I like to read it. But once we reach the second half and then the adventure or the dragon hunt begins, somehow that ends up being the weak part of the novel for me. A Natural History of Dragons overall is really a mixed reading experience. I truly enjoyed reading the first half, but not the second half. I have heard from many readers, including the fans of the series, that A Natural History of Dragons is by far the weakest book in the entire series. So this is probably something similar to the Threadlight trilogy, except that in the case of the Threadlight trilogy, I end up enjoying Voice of War much more than I felt disappointed by it. I didn't even feel disappointed by the Voice of War. I really enjoyed reading that book, even though it is not one of my favorite books. But this one, I definitely felt disappointed a lot in the second half of it. And I think Jacob is way too good of a character for Isabella Trent. Isabella is, well, she is quite selfish and obsessive in her research about dragons. It is her passion, and she's not afraid to do anything to gain her dream, to achieve her dreams. And well, it caused a lot of troubles for the peoples surrounding her. One of the plus side though of reading A Natural History of Dragons is that this book contained 10 interior illustrations by Todd Lockwood, and I know this is available in the next books as well. I think it is available in all the books in the Memoirs of Lady Trent series, and they actually helped me. They help enhance my reading experience of A Natural History of Dragons, because without those artworks, I think my experience of reading A Natural History of Dragons will decrease even more. I felt so disappointed with the second half, really. I think it felt pointless in many sections, like it went around in direction that felt like fillers in order to achieve the objective. And yeah, I'm not a fan of the entire second half of A Natural History of Dragons, and I really hope the second book, which I will try to read this month, I hope it will be a better book compared to this one. If not, well, I think the series is in a risk of being DNF by me. We will see. But yeah, for now, I'm giving this one a 3 out of 5 stars. Enjoyable first half, but very disappointing second half. So that's really all the novella and novels that I finished reading last month. Once again, as a reminder, if you want to know my full thoughts regarding the books that I just talked about, you can check them out. You can check out the full reviews either on my YouTube channel or on my Goodreads and my blog Novel Notions. I have posted a full spoiler-free review of all of them. As for the manga, well, I read 15 volumes of Naruto by Masashi Kishimoto in the month of February. It is up to the end of the Chunin examination arc. If you have read Naruto, you will know what I'm talking about, and I will not take too much of your time here. I'm just here to talk about how much it fills my nostalgia of the story. Naruto was one of the big three of shonen, Naruto, Bleach, and One Piece. One Piece, after all, still reigns as the king right now. But back then, it was kind of like a tie between those three, and I have read Naruto and One Piece so many times. Bleach, not as many as these two, and it is great to visit one of my favorite manga series again, even though the series is not without its flaws. Naruto, especially at the end, definitely contains some flaws, but I look forward to getting there and find out how I will feel about them now on this reread. As for my book of the month, once again, it is another book in the Sun Eater series. I hope you don't get bored of me making a book in the Sun Eater as my book of the month, but it is. As I said, even though I did not love this one as much as the previous books in the Sun Eater, this is still one of my favorite books, and it is definitely the best book that I read in the month of February. And yeah, I think that's really it from me. That's all the books that I managed to finish last month. Do let me know how many books you finished last month and what do you think about the books that I finished. What was your favorite book in the month of February? As always, thank you so much for watching and thank you for your support. Bye-bye. Lastly, I want to say thank you so much once again to all my patrons who keep on supporting me.